Good morning. I assume we're live. Good morning, and thank you everyone for being here. Today is an exciting, big moment for Cloudvirga, one that we've been working towards. We're excited to introduce Tropos to you today, a new kind of borrower portal built for the future of digital lending. But Tropos isn't just a new product. It's our response to a very real shift that we've seen across our industry. And we've taken valuable feedback from many lenders. We've also done consumer surveys, and we didn't want to just build technology. We actually wanted to bring value to the market, and that's what drove us to build Tropos. So the platform we're revealing today is the answer to the questions that we asked throughout our journey of lenders and consumers. What are you really looking for in a consumer experience, and what do lenders need to accomplish in the loan process? So as you'll see, it's fast to deploy, it's modular and adaptable, it integrates with what you already use, and it gives borrowers the kind of intuitive, personalized experience that they expect. And Jessica will go into a lot more detail as she shows the product. So we couldn't be prouder of what we've built. We're very excited to be here today. And with that, I will hand it over to Jessica to dive in. She's our head of product and technology. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're really excited to share the hard work the team here at Cloudvirga has been putting in over the last year to bring this vision that Maria just articulated to life. A couple of key points that won't be obvious necessarily in a product-centric demo, but I do want to highlight that our focus was really modern technology stack first, then product. So everything that we'll show you, everything that we talk about, everything you'll see in marketing material or sales demos or on our website going forward, we'll speak to the level of dynamics, the level of flexibility, the level of ownership you as the lender will have. That was all contemplated in how we thought about this platform. It's fully cloud native. It's leveraging infrastructure as code. It's dynamic. We've thought through things specifically in the context of how a lender would use a platform, how they would want their borrower to use a platform, and we accounted for that in our technology. So spinning up environments is very straightforward. Scaling is very straightforward. Growing with your organization as you change, as your volume shifts, as your product shifts. Those are all things that we've contemplated as part of our solution. I won't spend a lot of time talking about the infrastructure pieces today. Those are definitely things that we can talk about if you're interested in hearing more. We can certainly do a one-on-one demonstration with you, talk a little bit more about the technology under the hood, and share with you how that technology enables a scalable future for you and your customers. Today, I'm going to focus on walking you through the platform itself, giving you a sense for how this solution ultimately works, talking you through some of the details about how the customization works, how that would manifest in the experience that your consumers have, and how to think about this in a long-term play for how you interact with your customers, the vision for the future, and situations where you're a multi-product type of lender, how you build those borrowers and customers for life. So I'm really excited to show that to you today. So let me just go right on in. Okay. So what we have here is sort of a landing page, and a couple of things to know about landing pages in this context. If you're a lender that has more of a single sign-on experience and you're looking for us to be a component within a broader solution, we can certainly support that. If you maybe have not made a strong investment in your digital experience and you're looking to dip your toe in the water, we can certainly support that as well. One of the things that I want to make clear to you guys is that you're in control of what this looks like. So the logos, the colors, the images, all of the content at the bottom, this is all customizable to you and your brand. Because of the way we've built our technology and our platform, we can actually scale this across a lot of different components, hierarchies, various concepts in how your organization is structured. So if you have divisions that are branded differently, branches that are branded differently, if you have a different branding for specific products, for specific types of lending, for specific groups, languages, all of those things we can accommodate. So you could feasibly have multiple versions of this portal depending on ultimately what matters to you. So some of the things that we're, providing you out of the box, we've got home affordability calculators, we've got refinance comparisons. These are things that we'll be expanding and building on as we go. But these things are available to you if you haven't made that investment yourself, if you're thinking about it, if you want to leverage this as a way to lead build, as a way to get people into the pipeline, as a way to facilitate pre-qualification and pre-approval. We've thought through those elements and having contemplated that both in a pre-login experience, if that makes sense to you. This is a widget. You can incorporate it into your active website that you already have, or it can be a component that exists behind the login screen. So if we just sort of take you into this experience from a consumer perspective, I'm going to leverage my own account so that I can simulate for you a few different scenarios and how that experience would manifest for your consumers. So here we have a landing page. The way to think about this landing page in context of your experience, if you're a multi-loan, multi-product type of lender, then this would be a landing page where feasibly your customers might see a campaign that you want to push to them that highlights that they're eligible for a specific type of product. If they have multiple products with you, this would also be an area where they could come to and look at their loans, understand if there's work that needs to be done, if there's something they need to complete, or just generally pull their loan details for various reasons. This structure is meant to be the landing page for consumers that already have a relationship with you. So certainly if they're coming to you out of the gate and they do not already have an experience with you, if they're net new, if they've come to your website on their own, if the loan officers invited them to apply, but they're not an existing customer, then they would likely come into an experience, they would log in, and then they would immediately be presented with the option to start an application. But in a sense where they are a customer of yours already, they potentially have active loans with you or applications in flight, this is a landing page that they would come to and see, various types of loans. So in this case, as a customer, there's a lot of loans here, probably wouldn't have that many in a real life scenario, but for the purposes of demonstrating a few different examples to you, I've simulated quite a few different types of scenarios just so you can get a broader sense for how the structure works. So if we just look at some of the loans I've already started, what would happen if I have an active loan is I would be dropped into this action center. And this action center is populated at the point in which I complete the application in real time. So this is a dynamic set of actions based on what you said in the application, and what displays here, how it fires, what it says is entirely customizable by you out of the box. This is not you pay me custom development dollars. This is you can make these adjustments as appropriate for your business. So any of the data that we capture in the application, you can feasibly string elements of that together to say, if this is true and this is true, then display this particular action. We've built a lot of these out of the box, and we've taken into account how an underwriter would be looking at this information, how a loan officer or processor might be looking at it to grab the most pertinent information up front so that we get the cleanest file possible over to our underwriters and our processors to limit the number of loops between the customer and all of the loan team. Our understanding from our market research is that most lenders suggest there's a 3 to 4 time loop between all of the individual entities within this loan before all of the right documents and details are supplied. So in this example, you can see that this customer is separated. They didn't automatically verify, so we've asked for some, specific bank statements. They indicated they had other expenses. We obviously need the photo ID for verification purposes, and we requested their pay stubs. They've also already completed a document and uploaded their W-2. So from this page, the customer can actually upload a document. They can select a various set of documents. They can apply those documents. So if we just go and find a file here, and we'll just upload something fun. We can associate it to multiple different items. Okay. If we look at another couple of examples, we've got an example here where the customer is applying for a refinance. So we've asked for specific information from them. In this example, they did not automatically verify. So again, we need their W-2, we need their pay stubs, and obviously in a refinance situation, we're looking for their homeowner's insurance information. And a couple of other examples here. This customer has indicated that they are paying child support. So we're requesting information about, or they're receiving child support. So we're requesting information. They're also separated. So we've requested that. And they articulated that they have earnest money as part of their financial situation. So we've requested information on those pieces. Another thing to point out, we track their due dates. So if they come back into the system at a given point and they're past due, they'll see some flags and some details that suggest to them, hey, you really need to provide us this documentation. It's now past due. But this will be their sort of centralized hub where they'll come to when their loan is in process. This is where they would, feasibly see verification if there was a task for that, fees if there was a task for that, their closing disclosures, their initial disclosures, all of that would essentially filter in through this singular hub so the customer is aware in relative real time what it is they need to provide. There's also a number of notifications that go out and trigger based on things that have occurred on the back end, things that the customer has done, things that the loan officer or underwriter have transacted on that notify them they need to log in and take action. And when they receive those alerts, they're presented with this particular screen. So this just becomes a very simple way of the customer interacting with a loan. So everything here, as mentioned, this description, this hover help, what shows up on the screen is all out of the box customizable by you as the lender. So if we take a loan that we've started, we'll walk you through the process of completing an application. So some things to note, obviously color schemes, the view here is customizable by you as well. And everything that you're going to see as I take you through this flow, you can customize out of the box. So if you looked at this and said, yeah, I don't actually want to ask for assets, or I'd rather ask for income and employment before assets, or I don't like the way this says, tell us about your current residence, or hey, maybe there are different questions I want to ask at various points in the process. That again is all customizable by you out of the box. Now, that's not to say you have to build it. There is a structure and out-of-the-box approach, which is what I'm going to show you on this screen. So if you said, hey, I'm good with that, no problem. If you said, I want to change it, but I'm not sure I have the capacity, I have the resources, I have the skill set to make these changes, that's still something that we can support you on. We will meet you where you're at. If you need our help, we'll offer it. If you want to own it and manage it yourself, you can certainly do that as well. You can also filter this by language. So if you had a different experience for Spanish, for instance, you can make those types of adjustments. If the flow is the same, you just want it in Spanish, you can make those kinds of adjustments as well, so that this flow presents in the way that is reflective of your brand and your style. So going through this process, just to give you guys a sense for how this works. We built it in a, for lack of a better word, TurboTax style approach. So the customer is going through a guided flow. That flow is fairly straightforward in context. So cognitively, the questions are asked in a way in which a person would actually think about them or answer them. So it's easier to follow. It's far less overwhelming. It's easy to leave and come back to. When I get to a point where maybe I have to go do some research, I have to do some analysis, I'm not entirely sure on all this information. It's a simple, straightforward way of presenting the information, but it's also dynamic based on how you respond. So you can see that if I make some modifications to the answers to some of these questions, new questions will appear. And again, you control all of this. So if you don't like living rent-free, you can make that change. If you don't actually want to know if they rent, you don't have to ask that question. If you want to add an additional question for rent where we ask for an income, a specific rent amount, you can do that too. There are lots of different ways in which you can customize this to your own experience, your own perspective, your own brand essence. If you have specific ways of referring to things, those can all be accounted for as well. So if we go through this process and realize we want to change something, it's very straightforward for the customer to go back. So in this case, I'm going to change this information because I'm going to use a very specific customer so that I can show you our native integration for verifications. But again, this process is very easy for the customer to make adjustments. So most likely they wouldn't forget their own address, but you can see how easy it is to come back and make adjustments to the flow. So for this customer, they're going to provide their demographic information, and we're leveraging very specific test data here so that our verification process functions correctly. But you can see, again, this is a fairly straightforward process. Do I have dependents? Yes, it'll ask me how many. No. Okay, we move on. If we're married, then it'll ask me some questions about whether or not I'm applying with my spouse. If the answer is yes, then we'll fill this information in and they will get an invite to apply. And then our flow will join both of the applications together into a single submission. And the primary borrower's application status will not be reflected as completed until the co-borrower goes in and makes their application information or completes their application information as part of the process. So then, of course, you can see that if we're in the military, then we'll have some additional questions. We can provide our military status. We can identify that we're a surviving spouse, go through that process. We'll be answering homeownership questions, the required legal demographic questions, of course, with the ability to sort of opt out expressly and not answer. Then we've embedded a credit authorization here. And a couple of things to note about this. If you're a lender that doesn't want your customer to be able to do this as part of the process, you can turn this off. You can run hard credit here, soft credit here, whatever works for you. And as you can see by sort of the language here, this is editable by you and can be adjusted based on the expectations you want to set with your customer at this particular stage. The credit, we've also contemplated as a connection to automated verification. So verifications are expensive, credit's expensive. Soft credit's a little bit less expensive. So let's say you run a soft credit and you find out the customer's, score is 550. Well, maybe you want to set a threshold that says if their score is below a certain range, I don't actually want them to be able to run verifications automatically. So for the consumer, it would be transparent to them. They wouldn't know any difference. They just would not see an option to run verifications automatically. They would just be presented with the manual option. So we embed this early in the process so that it can help drive the next set of questions. At each module completion, the consumer will see the details they provided. They'll be able to edit those, jump right back into a specific stage of the process, or continue. Here at the About My Loan, we're generally asking what type of transaction you're looking for. So the reason this is here is a lot of the information on the front end would be required regardless of potential loan type. So this trajectory here, this stage here is really where we start to have a dynamic flow depending on which type of product you select. This would obviously be based on what products you offer. And certainly if you only offer one, then it's probably a question we don't need to ask. But, depending on what you offer, how many types of products you offer, the consumer would see different options here in the process. So we just say this consumer is looking to purchase. We ask if they're working with an agent. They are, they can provide that information or no. Here we ask them where they're looking to purchase their loan at. So let's just say they're going to be purchasing in Tuscaloosa, Roll Tide. And here we'll ask about the property they're purchasing. So what's the intention for this home? Is it, primary residence, second home, investment? If we look at primary residence, okay, well, what type of property type is it? In this case, it's a single family. And then how much would you like to borrow? So let's just say we're going big. And then here I can select a down payment that will automatically populate, or I can enter a custom amount. So let's just say I'm only offering 10,000. Well, not great, but your loan amount would be $490. So using a gift or grant, again, if the answer is yes, we'll ask where the gift or grant is coming from or what type it is. In this case, let's just say no. And then again, we'll get a summation of that particular section. Customer says next, and here we get into our automation experience. So in this case, the customer's credit satisfies what we're looking for. So they see an experience that offers them the option to connect or not. So for customers that are a little uncomfortable with the idea or the prospect of doing that, they have the option to opt out and add their assets manually. And certainly, one of the differences in that action center and those tasks, we won't ask you to provide documentation for something we've been able to verify. So it does shorten the process for the consumer. So if we just connect our financial accounts, here we're going to be using a test account, but the consumer can search for their actual bank. They're going to be presented with the logon screen. And then enter their information. They'll immediately get a notification from Account Check, just confirming that they are the one authorizing so that they have the ability to opt out of that process. Or obviously flag if for some reason it's not actually the consumer. So then I think most people are familiar with the asset verification process. What's happening now is I've provided account check with my banking information. So it's going out and looking for the details. One thing to note, I'm showing you account check and informative research in this particular demo because they are our sister company, but we can support a multitude of other integrations. While this is running our assets, it's a great time to sort of explain our agnostic infrastructure and architecture of the application. So we have established a approach where the application is separate from the integration. So we have an application set, the data is the data, the structure of the data is generic. We have a generic layer of information, and then we have a mapping layer that will then communicate out with third-party services. So the value to you is, let's say you're using IR today and tomorrow you say, nah, I don't want to use IR for credit anymore. We've actually switched to Meridian Link. For us, that's not really an issue. It's just a matter of a mapping adjustment. So historically, when you make changes, when you make adjustments to your integrations, to your vendors, your suppliers, you're potentially talking to your point of sale partners and saying, hey, do you support XYZ integration? And the answer might be no. And then you're faced with, well, now I have to wait for you to build, for you to customize, and how quickly can you do that? Because I need to make this change and I need to make some decisions. In this paradigm, that's a simple mapping exercise. So if you said in that same scenario, hey, we're moving to, Meridian Link, do you support that? For us, it's not a development effort. It's merely a mapping exercise and an adapter between our generic system and how, a Meridian Link or a Zactus or IR or any other point in between interprets that information. Because the data is the data. Credit is credit. All of the information in the application is standardized. So it really is just a matter of where that endpoint actually is, as opposed to, well, now I have to build a whole new nested integration. So in this example, we got our assets verified. The customer can see all of the information. They can add another asset. So let's just say they have one. In this case, we'll use earnest money. Let's just say they have 10,000. Great. That now reflects in this system. They can continue to add, or we can go to income and employment. Again, because their credit is a certain way or the lender hasn't configured a credit threshold, they'll see the option for automatic verification. Again, they can also add manually if they so choose. And so now we're verifying income and employment for the consumer. Great, their income has been verified. And again, you can see that information displayed here, so they are aware of what came back. And let's just say there's no other income. Then they're brought to expenses. Yes or no. Let's just say yes. Okay, well, what kind of expense type? Let's say we're paying child support, and let's say we're paying a certain amount. Great. Now we'll ask, do you own any other real estate? Yes or no. No in this case. And then declarations. The declarations change depending on if you're saying this is your primary residence or not. In this case, it is. I think most of you guys know what all the declarations are, so I won't read them out individually. We'll go through, just check no, get through the process, and then we will submit. Okay. So again, we come to this last section. Throughout this process, we've seen these checkboxes advance, so the customer is able to visually see where they're at in the application. Great. So now we're done with the application. Are we ready to submit? Yes. One other thing I want to highlight throughout this process is we will prevent the customer from being able to provide all pieces of information that would trigger TRID. you can generally decide which of the pieces of information you don't want to collect, but we don't trigger TRID through this process so that it doesn't become an administrative nightmare for you in terms of who's actually owning the loan, when does the disclosure clock start. So that's a configurable component of the process. You can kind of decide which of the 6 pieces you don't want to collect in the cycle. So if that was a question anyone had, just want to make sure I covered that as well. You can collect 5, you could collect 1, 4, whatever works for you. That and your business and how you approach it, we can accommodate. So now you can see, based on what we just went through, that a custom set of action items have presented to the consumer based on what we just said. So we're not asking for income documents or employment documents because we captured those authoritatively through the automated verification. This customer indicated they're receiving or paying child support as we entered. So here you can see that that particular item is now here. They suggested they have earnest money. So again, that particular element and component appeared as well. So that just sort of gives you a general sense for how the application flow works. So again, all of that entirely customizable by you. And I want to make the distinction between customizable and custom development. Everything that I'm talking about is truly customizable out of the box. We built the platform to be dynamic enough to make those adjustments. Everything you've seen on the screen in that application flow is rendered at the time the application starts. They're not hard-coded pages. So you as a lender have control over what that looks like, how that functions, without saying, you know, hey, now I got to pay you for a custom development, or I have to get in line to make these kinds of changes. Or, you know, now I have a new question I want to ask, and there's a reason I'm asking it, and it's specifically for filtering or validating a specific piece of information. That's all stuff that we can do right out of the box, right out of the gate. So I know that that sounds overwhelming. So if you're the type of lender that really doesn't have the time or the resources, again, this is something that we can support you on and control as part of our partnership. But if you are a lender that likes to have that level of control and ownership, it is available to you. So the last thing I'll show you is a loan here that has disclosure package. So as I mentioned, this action center is sort of the centralized hub for everything that they could potentially need to complete. So things like signing documents, paying fees would also appear in this action center. It's not just about give me a document. So in this particular case, this customer is ready for their initial disclosure package. We'll display when we received it. We'll also highlight any other actions that are outstanding. So in this example, they have some overdue tasks. Most likely they wouldn't get to the disclosure point without maybe clearing some of those, but point being that information will all display here in sort of a centralized location, as I mentioned. So if the customer gets to a disclosing package signing room, we will display to them their package. We'll show them the documents that are just available to review. So if I want to review a set of documents, I'll have that available, as you can see. So I can go in here and look at the specific documents that maybe don't require me to take any action other than review. And then we'll have the rest of the documents categorized, if applicable, between, you know, a handwritten signature requirement or an electronic signature option. So in a handwritten case, obviously I've got to view and download and potentially re-upload. And you can see here where I can download those particular items. And then in a electronic situation, I can view and e-sign the documents. So I think we've all sort of seen what a sign package looks like. So I won't go into it in great detail, but you can see here where the customer would just be sort of clicking through. They'd potentially sign. different pieces and parts of the application and go through that particular process. So we've contemplated quite a bit of the process. We've contemplated and accounted for the fact that various lenders are on different LOSs using different platforms for various pieces and parts of the application flow. And those are all things that we can support today. So I think the message for you as lenders, when we think about the vision for this platform, is, the sky's really the limit for you in terms of experience. So if you are a mortgage only lender, there's still tons of value here in how you can control this, how you manage this, how this integrates with your existing solutions. You don't have to make tech stack investments or adjustments to be able to leverage our platform. We can support things like A/B testing. So if you want to challenge a specific flow, specific scenarios, those are all things that we can support. If you have the dynamics between different branches, different divisions, different product types, as I mentioned at the beginning, those are all things that can be adjusted and built separately. So you could have a whole different color scheme, a whole different URL, a whole different flow for purchase between one division and another. Lots of ways for you to customize this solution. So it has, I think, broad value, certainly in the mortgage space. But if you are a lender that really is looking at a customer for life and trying to centralize and consolidate an experience so they always know what to expect, they always get the same construct, the same structure, the same experience in terms of language, branding, how the flow works, that's all part of how this application was built and constructed. So we can account for a home equity. We can account for different types of personal lending like auto, credit, depository bank accounts. Those are all things that can be added to this structure. If you think of it like a rail, so if you think of it like a railroad, the railroad itself is agnostic to the actual, train car on the track. It doesn't matter if it's BNSF or Union Pacific or any point in between. It's just looking for a train. And that is essentially the best metaphor I can offer for how this thing is structured and built. Is it's built to kind of do whatever needs to be done in the consumer lending space. So the goal here is you've made a promise to your customer or your member, and our solution is built to grow with you and grow with your customer through the various life events that would lead to lending in the first place. So our goal is to really humanize this experience, put the customer at the forefront, because without the customer, there is no loan, there is no need for a product like this, and there's no success for us or you without a strong consumer base. So how do we make the process that can feel overwhelming depending on their life event or context seem a little bit easier to get through? Everyone pays their taxes every year, and that process is very complicated in theory, but it can be demystified with the right technology, and that's really what we're trying to achieve here across a broad spectrum of loan types. So for you, how you might envision this, if you're, a lender, this bolts into your existing experience. We provide you a singular strategy without you having to make consolidation efforts in your tech stack. So if your auto is in a different system than your credit, than your personal, than your mortgage, we just sort of bolt on top of that because of the way we've architected our solution and built it to be, external endpoint agnostic. It's a very low effort investment for you, a very low effort implementation to build a centralized experience on top of a multitude of product types. So with that, those are kind of the key highlights, the key things we wanted to show you today. There will be more. We'll have more of these conversations. We have a number of things actively in flight on our roadmap. we're starting the conversations on incorporating closing itself so that you can close any type of loan within our platform, including scheduling the notarization. We're also starting to work on enhanced conditions and underwriting conditions, so bringing that process back to the consumer in a user-friendly way. And we've certainly got a lot going on, the admin functions and portal that we've been talking about through this conversation, and making sure that that process is as easy to manage for anyone in your organization as we would hope that it would be, and as easy it is for us since we built it. And we also have some folks starting to build a loan officer experience and a loan officer pipeline that incorporates all of the things you want from a CRM and things you want from a point of sale into one. So we have a lot going on. We'll continue to have these types of conversations, but we really appreciate you guys coming to this initial event with us so that we can kind of unveil this concept, unveil the structure for our product. This product is being branded as Tropos, so you'll start to see more and more information coming out from Cloudvirga about Tropos and Lend with Tropos. We're really excited about what we have to offer and are really appreciative of the folks that took the time to come today and hear our broad story and pitch on our vision and the product itself. I know we're, I think, at time, but if there are any general questions, I'm happy to answer.
Jessica, I do believe we have some questions from the audience. Charlie is going to ask them. Thank you.
Okay, I'll stop sharing just so I can actually see that screen.
Charlie, you're good?
I am, yes, sorry. We can all see these questions under the Q&A section, but this first one was posted here, which was, what kind of input did lenders actually have in shaping this new platform?
Well, I'm glad someone asked that. We actually spent quite a bit of time externally facing building this platform. So we had a number of in-person and virtual advisory panels that we opened up to leaders in the lending space across a multitude of organization types. So brokers, IMBs, banks, credit unions. We had really run the gamut on engaging with our industry expertise across a multitude of contexts. So everything that we put into the platform was a general reaction to feedback that we heard directly from folks like you that are looking to leverage a point of sale in a very specific way. So whether that's a pain point, whether that's a, hey, we really wish if, we accounted for that in how we structured this. We also, as a organization, have a multitude of years of experience in this space. So my product team is comprised of people from, prior competitors, people that have been operational leaders. So loan officers, underwriters, processors, escrow analysts, all points in between. So this was really built from a product standpoint with real expertise in how this process actually works. And certainly from a technology perspective, we have a strong engineering base that brought a level of expertise in best-in-class architecture and infrastructure. So yeah, the input, really a strong component of how we think about our organization, how we think about the vision of a product, and how we build. We're a pragmatic group of people. We want to build what people actually want to interact with and use, as opposed to, hey, we think this idea is a really cool one, but no one actually wants it. So that was a big part of how we structured and built this.
So we have another question in the Q&A, which is asking about what kind of training and support comes with Tropos after a lender signs on.
Yeah, I think it really will depend on how you want to leverage it. So as part of the conversation we'd have with you in negotiating a partnership, that would be part of what we talked to you about. Are you looking to be more hands-off and just work with us from a support perspective? Or do you really want to be very hands-on and really own some of these admin functions directly? And depending on that, the training would adjust slightly. But for the purposes of, training your loan officers, yes, we'll certainly have, an in-depth training conversation with you about how this will work, make sure that your loan officers are familiar with the concept, how it functions, how to think about it. And certainly we'll provide, the right structure on how they would invite people to apply, how the consumer would use it, what they would expect to see, and how that process would ultimately work. And then from a change management perspective, there's a fair amount of analytics built into our platform that we can expose to you that will help us have ongoing conversations with you about adoption. So if we're seeing fallout, so from a customer behavioral perspective, we'll work with you to reevaluate the flow, think through alternatives, think through what might be motivating a fallout at a specific point, if there is a specific point. If we're saying that there's less utilization for one loan officer over another, we can have some conversations with you about that and some potential strategies to boost adoption. We're here alongside you, along with you throughout the whole process. So it's not just a here's the system, adios. It's really a partnership and making sure that you're getting out of this what you need to get out of it. I think the great news about a consumer experience is the actual training is very minimal. The bigger training is really in how you administer the platform and making sure that LOs understand what it does, how it works, how it can be useful to them, and then their process to make sure that consumers are going to the site that is connected to them directly. But I think the lift is somewhat minimal on the front end. It's really more about evaluating the outcome, understanding the analytics on how it's being used, the behavioral patterns, and then recalibrating if there's, some things that show up that are really evident as potentially driving some unexpected outcomes.
Great. Well, we have another question asked. Someone's asking, what's the implementation time from start to finish, and how does that process look?
Well, I think the great news about the implementation time is it really somewhat depends on you and your level of knowledge on your platform. So with our structure, I mentioned at the top of this conversation, the concept of infrastructure as code. We can spin an environment up for you in relatively short order, like a day. It's probably hours, but I'll say a day to be conservative. Then if we're going to add any sort of customization for you out of the gate, if you said, these are my settings, this is how I want this to work, that's a week to 2 weeks. And I only say that it's not that much effort. It's purely coordination, understanding everyone's got day jobs, calendars, making sure that we can get the right amount of time with you to get some of these things done, but not a hard concept. When I talk about the agnostic layer in the mapping, that really is the key point of the implementation. So if we've already built an integration for you, if you said, well, I'm an Encompass user, great. We have a native integration with Encompass, not a problem. If you said, hey, I'm using a different LOS, or I'm using Encompass, but I'm also using this, well, then it's really just a mapping exercise to say, okay, here's all the data. Where are you looking for this data to go? And then we just do the mapping for you on that. So again, not a really complicated experience from start to finish. It's really a matter of you sort of understanding your data structure. Now, having said that, we can arrange that implementation a couple of different ways. It's simply we expose all the information to you, and if you're an expert, you know exactly what to do with it, and we're hands off. Or it can be the opposite, which is, hey, actually, we really need your help, and we're happy to engage and partner with you and do any of the mapping that's required to make sure that the system works well for you. But in terms of implementation, it's a fairly straightforward process from our perspective. So it's not months, it's weeks.
Great. And another question is, what sort of analytics are available to lenders who are using Tropos?
So as a former operator myself, and someone that was responsible for answering a lot of compliance or regulatory questions about what the system did or does, or what a consumer might have seen at a given point, We've really factored in things from a session perspective. So recognizing that each login into the platform is its own individual experience, and a lender may want to know what happened in each of those experiences. That's really how we've thought about it and how we've constructed it. So I can give you information at a micro level and say for this individual customer, they logged in here, they did this, then they abandoned, then they came back, then they did this, then they signed, then this was the outcome, and sort of highlight throughout that consumer's experience what they did over time and how long that ultimately took them to complete. But we can also look at information in a macro sense and say, okay, for every loan that maybe never finished, where did they stop? Or if we wanted to look at a very specific component of this solution and say, well, what's our success rate here? That's all information that, we can present and provide to you directly. As far as administrative functions, if you change the language, we'll track and say, well, at this particular time, this was the version of the solution that you had in play, which said XYZ. And here's who changed it. So if, something changes, it doesn't go well, we can capture all of that sort of information too. We'd also be able to tell you, I think, by loan officer, like what the ultimate completion rate is. So if there's a loan officer assigned to the consumer, we'd be able to tell you that information, not necessarily as a measurement of an LO's effectiveness per se, but certainly you'd be able to see some trend lines if you had variability between one or the other. We can certainly show that to you at a product level as well. Say, okay, well, this product is performing really well. Why isn't this one? Why are my close rates lower? And we can sort of identify where your fallout is. And certainly we can track volume, all the standard metrics you'd want to know about how many people are accessing, coming to, completing, all of that. We try to think about data from an actual operational leader's perspective. What would you want to know? How would you quantify success? How would you know when you need to pivot or rethink or make some adjustments? And then certainly the compliance element of it, right? If a consumer's like, well, I didn't know that, it didn't tell me that, we can certainly provide that level of insight and detail as well. And certainly any of the consents that we track, any of the revocation of consents that occur, that's all information that we track and can capture and share as well.
Okay, so another question is asking what systems can the platform integrate with, which I suspect means what can it integrate with out of the box, because I think a large part of your point has been that, the integrations are largely universal and vendor agnostic.
Right. I think that really is the key point, is we're agnostic to the vendor. So in terms of who we can integrate with, we can integrate with anybody. Natively out of the box, of course, we have a nested Encompass integration. We're an Encompass partner, and Encompass is a fairly ubiquitous partner in various lending spaces. So of course we have that. I mentioned our sister company, Informative Research. So Informative Research, Account Check, those things are natively out of the box as well. DocuTech, Encompass Docs, all of those things are components of our solution. As far as, what you might be using differently, again, simple mapping exercise from our perspective. We have genericized import-export concepts where, if you're using, I'll just pick one, Byte, that's simply mapping for our purposes. So it's not really about integration per se. It's really about mapping how they're leveraging the data that we have structured.
Well, I think the timing worked out there because we are out of questions. So maybe we'll give it, 30 more seconds to see if anyone has a last minute question, but we've used up an hour here.
Perfect.
Thank you all for joining.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. And as I mentioned, we'll continue to have these broad unveilings as newer components come online for the product set. Hopefully, this piqued your interest and you'll be interested in seeing more and talking to us a little bit deeper, but certainly appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you.
Thank you.